So it's almost been a year since Concord has been nuked off the internet. It is one of the worst selling games of all time, and it was basically nuked off the internet. Again, a live service game like this was completely shut down. But I still think the games will have been preserved in some way, so the game be played offline with bots or something. Today, we'll talk about why bad games deserve to be preserved. So, almost everybody, when they talk about video game preservation, they only want good games to be preserved, which makes sense. You want people, Gen Beta or Gen Alpha to be able to play Final Fantasy VII, to experience games like Earthbound, Butter Free, to experience a game like Super Mario 64 just as you did, as well. But the problem is, no one ever talks about the bad games. No one ever talks about Bubsy 3D. Why would you want to preserve Bubsy 3D? It's a bad game. It's to be forgotten forever, just like every other bad game. But the thing is, most people have never played the worst games of all time. Okay, most people have never played them. I have never played Super Mario 64. I have never played E.T., Big Rigs, Bubsy 3D, and Action 52. But I think these games should be as important as games like Minecraft, Skyrim, and be preserved, you know, as well. Bad games, I think, can teach developers a lesson of how not to make a game, how not to of what not to do with a video game, which I think is obviously 100% the case. For example, look at Sonic. Every Sonic game is basically preserved, but a few games. And one of the most infamous Sonic games has never been ported, published, or done anything on other platforms. And that is, of course, Sonic 06. Yes. So, Sonic 06 was released in 2006, and it's quite sad that this game has basically been forgotten because it's a bad game. There's even actually a modding community that have actually fixed most of the problems of the game as well, but I do think Sega should remake or redo Sonic 06. I think it's 100% doable and should not be forgotten forever. Heck, well now Sega just remade Sonic Generations and Sonic Colors, and wouldn't be surprised if we get even a remake of Sonic Forces at some point as well. But Sonic 06, because it's so infamously bad, will never be touched by Sega again, which means outside of physical copies released during 2006 holiday season, there is no way to play this game. Yes, the game is only like $20 on Amazon, but there's no way to play this game besides buying a physical copy of the game. And it's quite sad because they had lots of consoles of that game that could work as well. There was no reason Sonic 06 should not be put onto modern Steam storefronts, but every other major Sonic game like Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Colors, Sonic the original Sonic Collection, almost all those games have been preserved and put onto newer platforms. Same thing with Final Fantasy. Every Final Fantasy game has basically been preserved, at least on Steam. At least until the Steam server is shut down, you're able to play the older Final Fantasy games as well, and you don't have to go onto a sketchy website to play them. Okay, and very recently, two very bad games have been preserved. Two of the 5 games I mentioned in the beginning of the video, have now been essentially preserved on Steam. Big Rigs Over the Road Racing, and now more recently Bubsy 3D. Yes, Bubsy 3D is officially being preserved by Atari and put on to Steam, which means Bubsy 3D will be finally available outside the PS1 for the first time since 1996. And I do think just because a game is bad, I do not think just because a game is bad, it doesn't need to be forgotten forever. It doesn't need to be just restricted to another platform, an old platform, to basically watch indefinitely for eternity. And Bubsy 3D, yes, because nobody wants to play Bubsy 3D. It is around $40, but some of the games can go up to $80 to $90 if you want the full edition or something like that as well. But now the game is available on Steam if you really want to play the infamous Bubsy 3D, as well on the Bubsy Collection. Yes, it's called the Bubsy the Perfect Collection on Steam. Yes, that means Bubsy will be released. Well, Bubsy 3D will be on Steam forever. until at least the Steam server is shut down. Which means for the and also will also be on the PS5. It'll also be on the Switch one and probably Switch 2, and probably will be on the and also be on the Xbox Series X and S. Which means Bubsy 3D has been preserved for modern platforms, much like Big Rigs Over the World Racing was. And there's so many other bad games I think that should be preserved and put on newer platforms, because I think people should be able to experience bad games as well. Okay, as well. Just because a game is considered bad doesn't mean it should be forgotten forever. Okay, and we can go back to Concord being shut down in a couple weeks. Okay, Concord. Well, you're if you want to. So everybody talks basically really crap about Concord, including myself. But no one's out because the servers have been shut down. It is impossible, literally impossible to play Concord if you have the game as well. Yes, it is literally impossible to play this game. So guess what? You cannot play Concord because guess what? You can't. The servers are shut down, and this is why modern gaming misses the point because guess what? You can't play Concord as well. Okay, as well. For example, many Wii games, at least there's a fan base. Like for example, lots of games like Mario Kart Wii is still stuck on the Wii, but even like Nintendo is planning on preserving all the NES games through the later platforms, but they're only preserving like the popular games basically as well. And I do think bad games should be preserved. It is just an absolute reason. There's absolutely many reasons you should preserve bad games. One, to teach new developers how not to make a game, what not to do in a game. Okay, that's an easy way. Bad games can teach people, oh, this is a bad game. Let's not repeat the same mistakes as this game did as well. There is, oh, this game is garbage, like Concord. That game could easily teach people how not to make a live service game. Okay, as well. And I do think the live service market is oversaturated to begin with, so, but yeah, I do think bad games, like, I know everybody wants to preserve every good game in the world, obviously, so younger generations can, of course, play it. But the problem is, no one ever talks about bad games. No one ever says, oh yeah, I want to preserve Concord. I want to preserve Bubsy 3D. I want to preserve Superman 64. I want to preserve, all the bad games in the world, okay? Because I do think people should be able to experience bad games and see, oh yeah, these games suck. Let's not make a game like this, okay? Or just so people can say, oh yeah, I only played, like, for example, there was a Gen Z kid that made like a video about games about and said how he hasn't that they haven't that guy has not really played any bad games basically because bad games did not really exist during the Wii era. There were some bad games, but the first disappointing game that was Luigi's Mansion 2, and that game was just mid, but as well. But a bad game still can teach people a lesson. Hey, not every game is gonna be a good game, and you can also say the same thing with movies too. Bad movies, I think, deserve to be preserved just as much as good movies as well. Okay, but at least the bad movies they do preserve them on Blu-ray and DVD for now. So, for example, you can still watch Joker 2, but I think the problem is there's so many bad streaming movies because they're bad movies like Megamind 2. There'll be no way to ever really truly play a movie or watch a movie like that outside the streaming service. So once they realize, hey, Mega Man 2 isn't making much money, let's remove it off the platform. And the movie is gone forever, basically, as well. Yeah. But yeah. Yeah. And especially in this day and age of digital only stuff, bad movies and bad games should be preserved as much as good games and good movies. Goodbye.